Cleopatra had a daughter. She named her Moon, not a nickname, a royal title stamped into history, worn like a crown for the rest of her life. Her son got a title too, Sun. 2 children, born of one queen, carrying the sky itself in their names. Why would anyone do that? To understand this, you have to understand who Cleopatra believed she was. Not just a queen sitting on a throne, a goddess walking around in human skin. She called herself the new Isis, the mother goddess of Egypt, ruler of magic and fate, and in later Greco-Roman tradition, increasingly linked with the moon and its tides. In temple carvings, she appears wearing horns and a solar disk above her head, the same crown Isis had worn for centuries before her, though by Cleopatra's time she was also widely identified with the moon. This was not vanity. In Egypt, a ruler who claimed to be a god commanded a kind of power no army could match. Belief was her sharpest weapon. Egypt's religious life leaned heavily on the moon. Priests tracked its phases to set festivals, while the civil calendar and the Nile's floods followed the sun and stars. The sky wasn't decoration. It shaped the rhythms the whole kingdom obeyed. In 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to twins. Fathered by the Roman general Mark Antony, she had a decision to make. What do you name a god's children? She chose Alexander Helios for her son, Helios, the Greek sun god, and Cleopatra Selene for her daughter, Selene, goddess of the moon. Sun and moon, not poetry, a political statement aimed straight at Rome and at every kingdom lying east of it. In the ancient world, the sun ruled the day and the moon ruled the night. Together they ruled everything in between. That was the message she was sending. 3 years later, Cleopatra had a 3rd child with Antony. She named him Ptolemy Philadelphus. Even his name meant brother loving, a dynasty stacked with meaning, layer after layer. Then, in 34 BC, Antony staged one of the boldest political moves in ancient history. Historians call it the Donations of Alexandria. In front of a massive crowd seated on golden thrones, dressed as living gods, Antony declared Cleopatra Queen of Kings. Her children were named rulers over real Roman territory. 6-year-old Alexander Helios, the sun, was granted Armenia, Media, and lands stretching toward Parthia. His twin sister, 6-year-old Cleopatra Selene, the moon, was granted Cyrenaica and Libya. 6-year-olds ruling empires they'd never seen. It sounds absurd, but this was never really about them. It was a message to Rome. The East now belongs to Egypt's bloodline. Back in Rome, this news landed like a declaration of war. Octavian, Antony's rival, took the ceremony and rebuilt it as propaganda for his own cause. He told the Senate that Antony had gone native, seduced by an Eastern queen, handing away Roman land to her children. It worked. War followed almost immediately. In 31 BC, the fleets met at Actium. Cleopatra and Antony lost. A year later, both were dead. And the sun and moon, her twins, were still children. Alone. Legend says Cleopatra died by snakebite, alone in her chamber, dressed as Isis one last time. Even in death, she reached for the moon goddess she claimed to be. Octavian marched into Alexandria and took the children as prisoners. Not executed. That fate was reserved for Cleopatra's older son, Caesarion, fathered years earlier by Julius Caesar himself. Octavian reportedly said, "2 Caesars is one too many." Caesarion was killed, but sun, moon, and their younger brother were spared, paraded through Rome instead. They were marched in golden chains through the Roman triumph, crowds jeering at children who had once been titled rulers over half the known world. Here's where it gets strange. Instead of killing them, Octavian handed the children to his own sister, Octavia, the same woman Antony had abandoned for Cleopatra years earlier. Octavia raised her rival's children alongside her own, in her own house, in the heart of Rome. History rarely writes a stranger family arrangement than that one. Alexander Helios and his younger brother vanish from the historical record after this. No death recorded, no mention at all. Historians still argue about what happened to them, but Cleopatra Selene survived. The moon lived. And what happened to her afterward is stranger than anything her mother ever staged back in Alexandria. Rome married her off to Juba II, a North African king raised in Roman households himself, once a captured prince. Two children of conquered kingdoms, bound together by politics. Together they ruled Mauritania, in what's now Algeria and Morocco. And Cleopatra Selene did something remarkable. She quietly rebuilt her mother's image inside a kingdom Rome thought it controlled. She minted her own coins, on them a crocodile for Egypt, and a star beside a crescent moon for herself. She never once let the title die. She also helped rebuild her capital with strong Alexandrian influence, though it was formally renamed Caesarea in honor of Augustus, and named her own son Ptolemy, reviving her family's dynasty inside a kingdom that officially answered to Rome. That son, Ptolemy of Mauritania, grew up to rule his own kingdom. Decades later, the Emperor Caligula had him executed, reportedly for wearing a purple cloak too fine for Rome's taste. One generation. Cleopatra's grandson, killed by Rome for looking too much like royalty. The bloodline of the sun and the moon, finally erased, nearly a century after it began. So the moon never really disappeared. It just changed thrones, then changed them again. Cleopatra staged the sky as propaganda. Her daughter turned it into a legacy Rome couldn't fully erase. So which twin do you think Rome feared more? The sun who vanished without a trace, or the moon who came back and rebuilt an empire in her mother's name?